Hey everybody, Brady here. Welcome back to another London System speedrun video. We're playing against a 970. Very strong opponent this time. So, against Bishop f5 early, I'm not sure if we want to play Bishop f4. I think we might want to play c4. And if they take it, then we go knight c3, and we go e4. Surprisingly. I think c4 is the way to punish this. Yeah. And then we have this move queen to b3, which is a little bit hard to face because, unfortunately, this guy is a little tender. And this is exactly what we want to see in these positions. I'm going to continue my development naturally with knight to c3. c6, okay, makes sense. And let's play bishop to f4, right? We're playing in London. Let's get that move in. I am not opposed to playing the move. Knight to f6, good. Nice and natural. So I like taking. Takes. Is there any sense behind bishop g3? Maybe not, because their bishop's on f5, so it's unlikely we'll get any attack going. We could ignore it and let them take, but the thing is then they can take on c4, so that's all captures, right? So bishop b2 captures, 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 and then queen captures or something, but we have the weak d4 pawn, so I think we actually do want to take. Bishop b2. And castles. Natural, natural, natural. That's all we're looking for. We will capture. And I don't hate knight to e2. Where does this knight want to go? Does this knight want to jump in? If f6, is that a good or a bad thing for me? That's unclear. And that's why we should consider it. I think we're going to jump in. f6 could actually weaken their king a little bit, right? Especially on this long diagonal. I think it's worth a move where even if we do come back, we get something for it. And actually, I'm going to play knight to d3 instead. And there's a good reason why I want to play knight to d3 here, as opposed to a bad reason. Anyways, so my idea with this move is, where's my play coming from? Right? When you look at a position, you have to ask where your structure is facing. And if you don't know, you can also have a hint of where your opponent's structure is not facing as well. Both of those things should help you, at least a little bit, come to some sort of conclusion as to where you should play. For example, here, my structure is actually facing this side of the board. So it makes sense to play moves like c5 here. And I don't really want to play f3 because then they trade. So instead, I'd rather play c5 first, hopefully force them into this exchange. And I don't think this exchange is good for them at all. When we see this square, like, we want to recognize weaknesses here. And one of the biggest weaknesses they have, or that anyone can have, is backward pawns. And as we can see, they have a backward pawn here and a backward pawn here. That's very good for us. So I'm thinking of starting with f3. If rook h6, we have g3, defending everything. And it looks like we win that piece. I'm having trouble finding a problem with it. We could also start with knight takes and then f3. And I think that's even better. The reason why is because knight takes, queen takes, and then f3, they're not threatening any, like, craziness, you know? Because if they go rook h6, we have knight e5. Yeah, so we have knight e5 here, which is what they missed. Very tricky. So this is the problem, is if you're looking for threats down a line of calculation, you can run into problems. And this is something I will talk more about in the next part, and we'll talk more about in the analysis of this one as well. We're going... excuse me. So one thing that we need to discuss quite extensively is how to calculate. And what I've come to the conclusion of is that calculation is obviously very tricky, but there's a few rules you can have that should help you quite a bit. I'm going to start with G3 here. We have to be a little careful because we don't want to get mated. Queen G5, I'm thinking Queen B7. The good thing is that they don't have anything there. So Rook C7. And we just keep going. So we want to avoid any situation where we have to calculate like checks or sorry, any positions where we have to calculate threats. Threats are good, but they're the least likely to happen. So one threat that they do have right now is Rook takes H2, but that's a capture. So it's okay to calculate it. Because after takes, Queen H6 check, King back, they have mate. Okay. So let's talk about how to calculate a bit more effectively and how to avoid any blunders. So our opponent made some blunders here. They played a fine opening. I would say B6 is a little odd just because you see these light squares get a bit weaker when their bishop cannot defend it. But that's like a higher level concept I don't think we should worry about. Under, I'd say, maybe 1400, the types of weaknesses you should focus on are doubled pawns, isolated pawns, and backward pawns. And the reason why is because that is also still giving you an understanding of weaknesses of other types. For example, color complexes, or like weak squares, anything like this. Those still kind of embed in you these types of concepts without you even realizing it. But if you focus on way too many things, there's like this phenomenon. It's a scientific one where if you have too many choices, you don't choose any of them, or like it's harder to have an action. So if you follow just a few ideas conceptually when you're looking at a strategic position or tactical one, it makes your job a lot simpler. And then when you get better at that thing and you kind of like narrow your focus on what is effective and what isn't, then when you start adding more things in, you know how to use them a bit better. So this is very, very important for learning. So yeah, we're not really focused too much on the light squares. Of course, I was trying to look for things, but mainly in the mode of is it a check or a capture? So whenever we have tactics, for example, of course, again, taking, we'll just breeze past this, knight e4, captures, knight e5, f6, and knight to d3. So it may look a little strange, but I'm centralizing my knight a little bit and looking for c5. Because if I play c5, I can make, what is it? A backward pawn, and it stays a backward pawn. So, for example, knight to d7, rook ac1 is the last move, because let's do the captures thing. Push. You know, our first move doesn't have to be a capture, of course, but captures, and we lose the pawn. So we don't want to do that. So rook ac1 builds up. Now, after rook ac1 and f5, c5 is a very strong move, because now we're creating this backward pawn to open up. We're opening up our pieces against this backward pawn. And that's why even c5 from them for a few moves was good, because it gets rid of it. So c5 captures, and if they capture, we can see, again, just focusing on the weaknesses of backward pawns, we know what to do. We're going to build up against this guy. We're going to play rook c1, maybe queen a4, and eventually this pawn could just drop off the board very, very simply. So we don't really need to calculate any crazy line. This was very effective and Very simple. So rook f6, and I looked at captures. And the reason why a lot of players at this level may mess up, and I noticed this with some of my students, is that sometimes in a line like this, when there's a capture, sometimes they try making a threat or looking for a threat. But generally that's unprincipled and is going to lead you to trouble. And you're going to see that in the next episode, or at least the next video that's coming out tomorrow, where we cover the dragon Sicilian, where something similar to that actually happened in that game, where I had the chance to make a threat or make a capture down a bit of a longer line, and if I chose the threat, it would have been a mistake, whereas if I chose the capture, it would have been correct. So here, rook h6 is in the calculation, which they clearly calculated after rook f6, but unfortunately, they should have recaptured, because after rook h6, knight to e5, and you don't even need to calculate that necessarily, because what we see here is that, well, we are threatening knight e5, but we're also threatening a piece, and when you threaten a piece, that's a lot of material, so if you can keep it, that's very good. So rook h6, knight to e5, and we're super happy. c5, we just take it. Queen e7, I thought g3 was fine. Also f3 to blunt this bishop is okay too. Queen g5 and queen b7, rook c8 is also playable here. I just went with rook c7, and it's kind of to meet the point of if captures, then captures. So captures, we actually have this capture, and it's a very important one too. If we take, this is a blunder, queen h6 check, and mate. Ooh, you got to know your mates. So after captures, we can capture here, which is a desperado sacrifice, so we don't actually lose any material, and we capture on h2. So it might sound boring, it might sound repetitive, but this is a very, very effective way to not only improve your calculation, but to improve your chess. So make sure when you're looking at lines, with calculation, look for checks and captures. If the threats on the first move are fine, because, you know, when you see this position, for example, even if, well, of course, if this pawn wasn't here, then it would just be mate. But if we go back here, looking at threat like queen h4, that's a scary threat. So we kind of want to be at least a little bit aware of it. That's why I played g3. So looking at, you know, the first move, there's a threat. And then can I stop it before it happens, or should I stop it? Okay, yeah, I think g3 is a very logical move. And then queen g5, queen b7, rook c7, and again, this is where you start calculating mainly only captures. Like that's really the only thing to consider here is any sort of capture they make, we make captures or checks of our own. And even rook c8 was good, as mentioned before, because this forces material off, which is another strategic thing, which also helps us. For example, it's not just strategic things of the pawns, where there's backward pawns, isolated pawns, and doubled pawns, which unfortunately there aren't any doubled pawns on the board to highlight. But there's also the idea of like who's up material, and if you're up material, what's your goal? If you're down material, what's your goal? So they're down material, they're trying to mate, and that's a very effective strategy because mate ends the game. So it doesn't matter how much material you're up. If you get mated, you lose. And of course, since I'm up material, I actually want to trade things down because it gets rid of their attacking play. So that's another idea there. So rook c8 is also very good. Anyways, that's going to cover it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one. All right. Thanks for watching, and, well, bye.